good afternoon, and good morning. I assume that everybody can hear my voice clear and loud. So today we have a very exciting group of audience gathering together, over 300 people. So first of all, welcome on board. My name is Molly Huang, Production Director of Leader Associates and moderator of today's online session, Indonesia Solar Landscape in 2020, mostly sunny or partly cloudy. Joining me here today are two distinguished industry experts who have a specific knowledge about the Indonesian solar market. The first one is Mr. Fabbi Taniwha, Executive Director of Indonesian Policy Think Tank, IESR. And the second one is Mr. Salomon Baray, Country Director Indonesia of UAE's Aqua Power. So I'll just give the instruction on operative tricks and have a quick overview of today's agenda. Obviously, we will have two individual presentations from both regulatory and private engagement aspects. Key questions regarding the FIT, the power purchase agreement, large-scale solar, rooftop, investment and finance, as well as the impact of COVID-19 will all be addressed in today's session. Also, there will be a 10 to 15-minute Q&A followed by each of the presentation. All the solicited questions submitted during the registration have all been shared with our presenters of today, but we are very much welcome should there are more ideas coming up during the talk. Two last slides to give a brief introduction of who we are at Leader Associates and why we host this online session. Leader Associates is an international leading event organizer solely focuses on renewable energy. One interesting story about us is that although we are a Shanghai-based company founded in 2015, we have never done a single event in China. Our key areas of focus are in Asia-Pacific region and Europe specifically. In 2016, we entered into the Southeast Asian energy market and put the Philippines and Vietnam as two strategic spots. While in 2020, we make a brand new move into the Indonesian green energy market, as we see a strongest ever momentum combining the governmental resolutions, the multilateral fundings, and the private investment interest. Of course, we will have an offline full-day session in Jakarta on the 8th of September named Green Energy Future Indonesia, and we'll be joined by the Indonesia National Power Company, PLN, its subsidiary PJB, as well as Mazda, the co-developer for the 145 megawatt floating solar project. If you have any interest, please feel free to reach out. And now is the end of sales pitch. With great honor, I'd like to welcome our first presenter of today, Mr. Fabbi Taniwha, Executive Director of IESR.
So in Indonesia, actually in the last year, we have made quite significant progress compared to previous years. So at least last year, there are 4 utility scale solar power plants went into commission in late 2019. There were 3 projects in West Nusa Tenggara, in total 15 megawatt, and 1 project in North Sulawesi, 15 megawatt, which is right now is the biggest solar power plant. So compared to 2018, it was threefold increase. So by end of last year, we have installed at least 150 megawatt, mostly ground-mounted solar. it's not only that. I think as more project coming in, more solar project coming in, we have seen also declining of the cost of solar power projects. Just to give you an example, in 2015, when we first commissioned the 5 megawatt solar power plant in Kupang, in East Nusa Tenggara, the price of electricity was 25 cents per kilowatt hour, 25 to 30 cents per kilowatt hour. That's for 5 megawatt 5 years ago. And for this 15 megawatt solar power plant in North Sulawesi in Minahasa, it is tender in 2017, and the price is 10 cents per kilowatt hour. However, we also have seen quite remarkable progress with the last tender by PLN for 2 projects in Bali, each 25 megawatt, that resulted in the price around less than 5.9 cents per kilowatt hour. So we have seen this remarkable reduction of cost, and that's give kind of the hopeful that that we, at least now, we are can expect that the newer project can go beyond lower than 6 cents per kilowatt hour. Also, early this year, actually, the government PLN signed a contract with Masdar, and that gave a price for 150 megawatt of floating solar. That give the price is also less than 6 cents per kilowatt hour. So it's quite, I think, it's quite promising in 2019. Also, we have seen that the small scale rooftop solar is also a pickup. As of January 2019, it's only 600 users. But we have seen that number grow like almost 2.5 times to around 1,500 households by February 2020. So it's 1,600 in 2020. So we have seen that the interest from homeowners also is also quite high right now. It's not only that, but we also seen that for commercial building and industry, including RE100 company, also have shown interest in installing solar rooftop in their premise. So just to give you example that that this current increase or the incremental number of solar rooftop in the past 1 year actually also supported by the policies that the regulation from Indonesian government. Since the launch of 1 million solar rooftop initiative back in September 2017, we have seen quite a slow increase until November 2018, when Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources issued regulation number 49 2018, and after that we can see that a sharp increase actually in the small rooftop solar. And with the amendment of this regulation through the regulation number 13, 2019, so it's in October 2019, that give a more flexible for industry to install solar rooftop. We have also seen a remarkable interest from the industry to install solar rooftop. So I think it is a good because it means that the government also listen and try to adapt with the requirements of the market. Yeah. Although right now with the existing regulation, we still have issue with net metering, at least for small homeowners, for small solar rooftop for home. Because of the net metering policies right now, still less attractive for them. So under the regulation, still that the net metering is one for every kilowatt hour that generated. It's when we sell that electricity to the grid, PLN only counted 65% of that. So that makes the economics of small scale solar rooftop is actually not really good. But even though we have seen that progress in, as you can see in earlier slide, that sharp increase in a number of small solar rooftop solar of PLN consumers. So that was last year. So the question is, what do we expect this year? So it's very interesting because this year PLN has signed power purchase agreement with Masdar to build 145 floating solar in Cirata Dam, and that the agreed price is quite surprising. I think 5.7 cents per kilowatt hour, less than that, and it will be commissioned 2021. At least that was the plan. If we see the PLN RUPTL, so the business plan of PLN, is actually target 933 megawatt renewable in 2020, and 78 megawatt is actually coming from solar. But that was last year. We still have to wait for the 2020 PLN business plan. That what the knowledge that we have is it will have higher renewables and also higher solar percentage. But I think because of this COVID situation, there will be some adjustment in this. But we have to wait for another 1 or 2 months until we get the exact figure. There's also some development in regulation side. The ministry has changed or revised the Ministry Regulation number 50 2017 with MEMR regulation number 4 2020 early this year, and that gives kind of some certainties to some project that has been started or has finished its tender last year, 2 years ago, so they can move with the finalization of the contract and also development. Also, it's interestingly there's a new regulation from Minister of Public Works of that allow for the floating solar. So we can use 5% of the dam area to be used for floating PV. So it's gonna be a next hottest. We think that with this regulation, it could be the next hottest PV project, in particular in Java, because of it's not easy to find a land in Java. So floating solar is one of the potential projects that will be um, um, we think will be emerge in the next few years. Um, Also, that from the government side, so we have the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources also plans to build rooftop solar at 800 location, with a total budget of 11.2 million US dollar. But that's because of this COVID-19 situation. We're still uncertain on how it's going to be implemented. But since early of this year, they have done some preparation and they have allocated the project number in different provinces in Indonesia. So I think the preparation is now almost finished, but I think it's waiting for the tender to happen. But it's quite a big, because also in terms of budget-wise, it's increased compared to last year budget for this type of project. We also anticipate the new presidential regulation of fit-in tariff for small scale renewable. It's actually not 10 but 20, less than 20 megawatt capacity, and that's include for solar plants, which the original timetable, the regulation is supposed to issue in April this year, but then because of the COVID situation, that could be we can expect that it delay after June or July. So that's the estimation, but it's a good news, and the process has been started actually since last year of this regulation, and early this year it has been sent to the presidential office. So it shows that the government also serious with this regulation. With this coronavirus situation, we anticipate that rooftop solar for small-scale rooftop solar for households will be affected, and the reason for this, because the exchange rate factors, and you know that Indonesian rupiah is weakened 10 to 15% compared to last year, and that makes the capital cost for small-scale rooftop PV increase at least 15 to 20% because of this. Most of the part has to be imported, so we anticipate that the price also increase. Although we have seen that there's a number of company now in Indonesia that looking at this market already prepare a credit scheme to make easy for people to access, and they don't have to pay high upfront costs. But we see that the factor, the increasing price because of the weaken of in Indonesia currencies will also affect the market. However, from ISR market surveys that last year, the results show a significant number of early adopters and also early follower, in particular in Greater Jakarta area and also Surabaya, the second largest city in Indonesia. From our survey, we estimate around in total around 1.3 gigawatt peak of early adopters, rooftop capacity for early adopter for households in both cities. But the main issues is actually access to the technologies and also the initial upfront payment, which is for most homeowners is still considered high compared to the income. We also see that last year and early this year, the commitment from RE 100 company to install their solar, and I think that's because of the international commitment they have made. For instance, Danone Aqua is a multinational company, plans to install 5.6 megawatt in I think 5 of their factories around Indonesia by 2020. Also, a Multi-Bintang will install 2.7 megawatt in their brewery in the next 2 years, this year and next year. And as the latest revision on the regulation that slashed the capacity charge, we expect that other industries, also factories, would like to install this, but because of this crisis, I think they have to wait until the market is stable and the price is stable. And I think that's yeah, you can see that for the industry there is a lot of interest, commercial, business, and industries. We have from our survey, we have seen that the number of company in Indonesia already installed a number of solar rooftop, and that's until the until the end of last year. And there are more companies that plan to install this year, actually. So from our analysis, from our outlook this year, we have seen that from overall renewable energy market attractiveness in Indonesia, or investment attractiveness in Indonesia, we have seen a number of issues that still needs to be improved by governments. We looking at the overall investment climate still need to be improved, and that's related to the regulations that can attract investment, give more certainties to the investment, and we hope that with the upcoming renewable in tariff that could improve the investment climate. Also, the commitment from PLN, that because PLN is now the single buyer, in particular for large-scale, utility-scale ground-mounted solar, it is very important that PLN is willing to tender, but also is willing to purchase the electricity as required by the regulations. Yeah, and that's one of the main factors why in the past utility scale solar also quite slow in development because of PLN ability to absorb this to absorb the electricity from solar. Um, and also the other thing which is important is actually the other policy support in renewable, um, including the requirement of local content, which is for solar, is quite high right now, and that makes a number of projects have to delay in delivery to address this concern. The high local content, especially for solar modules. So revision or easing this local content regulations could help to stimulate the investment in also solar, especially utility scale solar. Finance is still the issues, especially the local finance, the interest rate, and I think it's very important now as we are start thinking of post-COVID economic recovery. It is very important that for local banking and also local finance, Indonesia financial authorities and in Indonesian central bank to think of lowering interest rate also so the local bank can provide lower interest rate for renewable energy project. And the other is the technology issue, because I think for solar, most component has to be imported, and it's very important also to build the industry in the country to make the price cheaper and accessible by the consumers. So that's in overall the situation of Indonesia solar market. There is still a potential, but we have to wait, because I think now the main uncertainty is that we don't really know until when we have to deal with this corona situation. So if we can stop this pandemic earlier, I think there are still possibilities for number of projects to be implemented, and also PLN can start bid for new project based on their business plan. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Fabbi. Quite a great presentation about the detailed policy outlook in Indonesia market, as well as some regulatory clauses specific. One more questions from the audience side. Not sure if you can now hear me clearly.
Yes.
Yes, and so the first question is, which part of Indonesia will be the priority price for solar power? Jawa, Bali, or Sumatra?
Well, there is no priority area per se, but of course, if you're looking at utility solar, one of the capital cost of solar now getting cheaper, and also the intention of PLN and also intention of the government to lower electricity production costs in eastern part of Indonesia, and we are talking about the area of Sulawesi, West Nusa Tenggara, Papua, Bali in some way. So I think if PLN give a priorities for the next project, it will be done in those area in eastern part. But we also see with this new development floating solar, with the experience of the signed agreement between PLN and Masdar, floating solar also can be have a potential to be implemented in Java. Yeah, because the number of dam hydropower dam in Java that allow a quite number of floating solar right now. But that's again, it's I think for the priority of the government now is looking from outside Java.
Okay, well understood. And the other question from our side would be regarding the oil price crush. We all know another problem along with the COVID-19 is the oil price battle. And how do you think of, the impact of oil price toward the solar market?
Well, in Indonesia in particular, I don't think it will have a large impact. First of all, I think the current price is an effect of lower demand, right? And I think the latest OPEC decision to cut the production level up to 10% of the total supply right now could easily increase the price when the demand start to emerge. I mean, we know that most of the country now in the lockdown, including major economies, China, India, including some part of Indonesia. But I think we can expect that for the next 3 months, the oil price could increase once the demand is recovered. So it's not make a difference. I mean, I think if you look at the short term, it will not make, I don't think it will impact. Second, looking at PLN use oil is, I think right now less than 5%. It's around 3 to 4% of the electricity, mostly focused in outside Java now, in the eastern part of Indonesia. So, and there is already plan in motion to replace the diesel power plant with renewables, including with solar. And so we don't think that this short-term disruption in price, or maybe if the oil price lower until early next year, it won't really change the plan actually for to replace these diesel generators. So but actually what more for rooftop solar, I think right now is, and actually for the retail market, is actually the exchange rate. The higher, the weaker Indonesia currency compared to dollars, that makes the from Indonesian point of view, it's getting expensive to acquire new small rooftop solar system. Yeah, because of it, you converted the number in rupiah, then I mean it's higher than before, like last year, something like that. So I don't think that oil price will have long-term effect to the market. Maybe short-term right now, but it's not about the oil, but it's more on the currency. If you look at the retail market. But for PLN plan, I think they will still continue. We still have to wait, of course, because this all the process seems stopped because of the pandemic. So we have to wait until a few months until we get out of this situation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And another question arises. It's regarding the oversupply in islands such as Java and Bali. According to the Ministry of Energy of Indonesia, the slowdown in the country's electricity demand has posed some significant impact to the renewable development in the country. Currently, the new power capacities that are being commissioned are more than
needed?
Yes.
What might be your comment?
Yes, I mean, know that with this, we have seen that in the last few months, the electricity demand, especially in Java, Bali, declined or reduced. The growth rate is not as expected or as planned before. But also there's a number, at least like 6 to 7 gigawatt of new thermal power will be commissioned in Java Bali system until the end of this year. So we understand that PLN have a quite difficult situation, but also if we look at the number of projects that will be built, let's say for the future project, actually, because right now you don't really have a lot of solar project in utility scale solar in Java, Bali. Most of the project maybe will be commissioned next year. I mean, if we look at the 2 projects in Bali, will be commissioned next year or early 2022. If any project bid for this year for Java Bali also will be commissioned in 2022. We hope that the situation will change, but again, I think with the current situation of reducing in terms of demand growth in Java Bali, it will affect PLN in allocating power plant, in particular renewable energy power plant. How PLN going to reallocate that? I think we don't know yet, because I think the situation is still fluid, dynamics, I can say, and we don't. It's all the demand of the electricity depends on the economic activities, right? So I mean, the expectation from the government that the economic will be recovered in the normal pace early of next year. So maybe we can see that for the next 2 years, the demand for electricity will back to normal. I mean, like what was planned before. But again, I think it's too early to tell right now. So that's why I mentioned that the focus could be in the outside of Java and Bali. And even though I think there's still a quite significant market for utility scale solar, well, will not very big, but I think there's quite significant market, and we have to see the implication or the impact of the upcoming anticipated regulation on the feed-in tariff. So that's actually my assessment.
Well understood. And if possible, would it be able for your side to exit the full screen mode while switching attention to the Q&A box in the control panel? There are several questions lining up for your answer, but due to the time limit, we'll just pick 4 of them.
Yes, well, I think I'll try to answer 1 or 2 questions. I think the legal title under which solar is authorized, it's, well, we have the ministerial regulation, so there's a procedures for PLN customers if they're willing to install solar power, solar rooftop, for instance, there is some procedure they have to follow. So basically, what you have to do is actually report to PLN and fill forms, and there will be kind of assessment, the technical assessment. Once the technical assessment done, I think then PLN has to, according to regulation, that PLN has to grant it the request. And PLN has to provide the estimator if you want to connect that to PLN grid. But if you want to use it your own, doesn't have to connect to PLN grid, then you can do whenever you feel you want to install the system. So there's a different mechanism, of course, and also for the local government. Yes, they can actually do the solar. Solar, as you know, in Indonesia, energy planning plan. Local government also responsible to meet the renewable energy target, the national renewable energy target. It has to be also met by local government, and some local government, they have a target of solar, for instance, and some of local government also, local government also have the obligation to put solar in their buildings, according to the presidential regulation number 20, the national energy plan. Sorry, they have to put at least 30% of the roof with the solar panel. So that's actually create another market as well. So yes, they can do for the local government.
Yes,
and this is about.
Sorry, please continue.
Merger and acquisition. Well, I think right now with the number of solar plants limited, I think merger and acquisition, because if we look at the number of utility scale solar, I think it's still less than, to my knowledge, is I think less than 10 projects right now. So it's hard to tell about the potential merger and acquisition. And if you look at the number of old projects, I think they are still make quite good profit. So I don't think the owners also is willing, and they are still. I mean, in terms of time, the age of this project is less than 6 years old, right? So I think it have to wait until several years until you can see this merger and acquisition potentials.
Yes. And one more question for you, because Indonesia is an island nation, and that's why the distributed energy looks to be a more feasible option for this island. I'm not sure if you are also interested in the distributed energy, and how do you see the outlook of energy storage or solar plus storage in this market?
Well, I think around, maybe rough estimation, between 5 to 7% of Indonesia, well, at least the number of people that has to be served by electricity live in the remote and in the remote areas. I think around 5 to 7%, I can say, and also that's and will not be connected through the grid. Yeah. So there's a potential for distributed energy resources system, solar plus battery or hybrid. I think it's still potential. If you look, Indonesia also, right? It's island-based country. We have thousands of islands, small scales plants, electricity power plants, serving between 1,000 to 5,000 households for each island, for instance, or 10,000. And I think and solar and hybrid type with storage is a potential. As I mentioned that PLN has been looking into this. but also the priority of the government for the next 2 years, I think this year and next year, will be providing universal and electricity access to to all Indonesian. Because the government has a target to have 100% electricity, so that will be the focus, and so improving the system. For instance, increasing the capacity with also battery storage, I think will come, but maybe not the priority this year. But I think in the next few years that will be that could be a prospective project. And also, if you look at this, the regulation, the draft regulations, the fit-in tariff, that's actually try to include the calculation for such system like hybrid and storage, because it's different economics and also different kind of pricing or tariff from the government regulations. Yeah. So that is coming, I think, and I think right now study and assessment have been done by a number of institutions, including Ministry of Energy itself is actually looking at this.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Fabbi. I know we are running out of time. It's already it's already around 4 o'clock in our country, and 3 o'clock in Indonesia. But we still have one more presenter waiting here. So for the rest of your questions, I would suggest that you directly send these questions or concerns to Mr. Fabbi's contact. And for the next 30 minutes, let's start with the presentation of Mr. Salomon. Hi, Mr. Salomon. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so without further ado, may you kindly do a brief introduction of yourself and have your presentation started?
Thank you very much, Molly. Yes, can we go to my slides, please?
Yes. You want to do the introduction first?
Sure. So, hello, everyone. My name is Salman Bare. I'm the country director for Aqua Power, covering Indonesia. I've been in the energy sector for the last 16 years, and I've worked and developed projects all over Asia. I'm really happy to be here and speak about the solar potential in Indonesia. Next slide, please. So what I will be talking about is basically a brief introduction of our company, and especially with respect to our solar experience in Middle East and Africa. I really want to share what we have learned from our experience there and how we can implement that in Indonesia. We'll talk about the solar opportunities here and also some of the challenges that we face and potential solutions. Next, please. So Aqua Power is a global company. We specialize in power generation and also water desalination. In terms of power portfolio, we have around 30,000 plus megawatt of power in 11 countries. Out of that, 23% of our portfolio is renewable energy. And mostly would be into solar or solar related technologies. We opened office in Indonesia just beginning of last year and have looked at various projects and opportunities here, which I will be sharing today. Next slide, please. So this is what you see on the slide is few of the solar projects that we as a company have done in Middle East and Africa region. And what I want to share with you are a couple of very interesting experiences. The first one is about Dubai. Um, if you see the bottom right part of the screen, um, the first tender for solar that Dubai did was in 2015, it's almost 5 years ago. This was for a 200 megawatt land PV project. Aqua Power won this tender with a tariff of 5.85 cents. At that time, the market was around 7 to 8 cents. So this was a very good tariff that the market in Middle East saw for the first time. 5 years later, in 2019, Dubai did another tender for their Phase 5 solar PV project. This was for a 900 megawatt land PV, and Aqua Power won the tender with a tariff of 1.69 cents. So, in a matter of 4 to 5 years, what we have seen is a tremendous decline in solar tariff, almost 71%. I think Mr. Taniwha also discussed or touched upon this when he talked about the three projects in Indonesia. But you can see that this has been happening all over the world. But what happened in Middle East is after this first tender done by Dubai, we saw all the other Middle Eastern countries starting to focus on renewable energy, especially solar. We saw tenders in Saudi, with tenders in Jordan, Oman, and soon these tenders became large-scale tenders, and therefore the tariff started coming down even further. Um, we saw the same phenomena in Africa last year when Ethiopia did a tender for 250 megawatt solar project. We won the tender with a tariff of 2.5 cents, which was again one of the lowest in the region. And now we see that the African nations have already also started to look at solar as a very reliable and competitive option. So if the tender is designed and structured properly, and the developers are able to enjoy the economies of scale, solar tariff can be very, very competitive and compete even with thermal tariff. Molly, if you don't mind, can you put yourself on mute? There's some disturbance coming from your side.
Yes, sorry, already.
Yeah, thank you. So moving on, we have to keep the example of the Middle East tenders in mind when we will discuss the challenges of Indonesia. But let's talk about the opportunities. The next slide, please. Yeah. So, frankly, the stage is set in Indonesia. We have high demand in the next 5 years for renewable energy. As Mr. Taniwha mentioned, there is a renewable energy target of 23% by 2025. I did a rough calculation based on the numbers that are publicly available. This 23% means that in the next 5 years, Indonesia needs to add 15 gigawatt of renewable energy into the grid. Now, that's a very aggressive target, which is good in a way because there is a strong push now from the government. But if you look at it realistically, if you look at all the technologies that can contribute to these 15 gigawatt, you've got geothermal and you've got hydro, which have very long term or long lead time in terms of development and construction. You've got wind. Well, while there are some resources of wind in Indonesia, but they're scattered. So in the end, I mean, it's a very simple mathematical question. Which technology of renewable energy would be able to contribute mostly towards this target? And the answer is very simple. It's going to be solar. Let's talk about the cost. I think, as I explained in my previous slide, the technological prices have come down significantly. The target tariff by government of Indonesia is that all new renewable projects should be 85% of the BPP. BPP is the regional average generation cost. Now, this is a very, very good target because now you know that all new renewable energy projects that are going to be brought in are going to save on power generation costs, are going to contribute positively towards the economy. And finally, in terms of liquidity and funding, it's available. There is no issue in terms of global banks. In fact, the issue is coming on the coal side. There are lots of banks who are not willing to participate or contribute funding towards coal projects. So there's a lot of free liquidity or available liquidity in the market, whether in terms of banks, finance companies, private equity funds. So liquidity is not a problem. What we also saw, keeping all this in mind, is how the government is looking at all of this. As you know, there were elections last year. The new government took over. And since the beginning of this year, we see a great push, a strong push by the government towards the renewable energy agenda. Just this year, since the beginning of this year, we've already seen multiple tenders, maybe around 7 or 8 projects in the market tendered either by PLN or its subsidiaries. And these are all renewable energy projects. 80% of them are solar projects. And in fact, if I'm not wrong, for the last 1.5, 2 years, there has not been any thermal tender in the country. So the government's intention and focus is very clear in terms of the opportunities here. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's talk about some of the challenges here. Of course, lower irradiation is a challenge that we face in Southeast Asia generally. When I mentioned 1.69 cents in Dubai, that's a lot to do with the fact that the sun is shining more there. Having said that, the prices of technology, the price of technology is going down, which is going to help Indonesia. And as I mentioned in my Middle East example, if Indonesia government or PLN can start doing bigger tenders or large-scale projects, it will bring in the economies of scale and reduce the tariff. So even though lower irradiation is a challenge, there are solutions or there are ideas which can help remove these challenges. The second challenge that we all face is the land availability. Again, the Middle Eastern tenders. The Middle Eastern tenders are very structured and designed in a way that it ensures the developers are focused on the EPC pricing and the financing pricing and innovation only. The government helps. Government most of the time finds land, helps in solving the interconnection issue and major permits, and that really helps the tender and helps reduce the tariff a lot. There used to be till last year that renewable energy projects were done on a BOT basis, but now that has been removed, which also confirms the focus of the government. Local content is still a challenge, and I believe the solution to this is for government to do more projects in Indonesia. When you do more projects, automatically there will be demand for more equipment, and the local industry will develop itself. We don't believe that government intervention should be there, because the flip side of this is that you get higher tariff. Everything is available in Indonesia. We can even get panels here, but at what cost? Because if we do projects at higher tariff, then the real benefit of renewable energy will never be known, and therefore the local industry would not, in fact, develop in the long term. So the best thing to do is to get low tariffs, do more and more projects, and therefore develop the local industry. For me, the biggest challenge, in fact, is going to be the transmission system. We've seen in many countries where they have moved into the renewable energy space and have struggled. Countries have struggled to manage, especially the intermittency part. The good part about entering the arena a little late is that we can learn from other countries. So I really think Indonesia can be proactive in this, engage with countries who have successfully integrated renewable energy in the transmission system, and prepare for the renewable energy to come in. So yes, there are challenges, but frankly, they are all manageable challenges, and many countries in the world are managing it. Next slide, please. So I just want to conclude that what we saw in the last 5 to 8 years was just the phase one of the solar revolution. We saw prices drop significantly in the last 5-10 years. That now people are actually talking about solar PV as a competitive solution as compared to other technologies. If you ask me about long-term future of solar technology, I think it's very clear that we have not even seen the real benefit that solar technology can give us. Just imagine what a low-cost battery storage option would do for this technology. And yes, 5 to 8 years ago, we were all talking about solar as a add-on technology and not a basic technology. For battery now also we do the same, but just wait 5 to 8 years, 5 to 10 years, and we'll see a new solar revolution in the making. So that's it from my side. What I did was I saw some very interesting questions which were raised by the participants when they were registering. So I have a slide actually. If Molly, can you go into the appendix where I can address some of the questions that have been asked?
Yes. This slide?
Yeah, thank you so much. So
okay, and if possible, may I exit the full screen model so I can also have a view of the Q&A box?
Please, yeah. Okay, so there were many questions actually asked by the participants, and I saw some common themes in those questions, so I've just tried to club them together. There's a lot of questions about the FIT, especially this question, what is a sensible FIT model for Indonesia that would entice more IPP developers? So frankly speaking, in Indonesia, if you ask PLN this question, I think they have more developers than they would like to see. You know, Indonesia doesn't need to entice more developers. There are PLN does this pre-qualification every 2 years, and they make a list called the DPT. There are more than 150 companies registered as interested parties with PLN. So I think if to get the best tariff and to get interested parties, a very structured and transparent tender process is the best way to entice IPP developers. Moving on to the status of regulation and impact of COVID. I think, as Mr. Taniwha mentioned, there might be some delays in regulations to come out. Right now, he's right. Everybody's looking at June after the Eid holidays. And yeah, I mean, impact of COVID is our delays, and we just have to be patient and wait for a couple of months.
Yes.
Should I go on to all the 6 questions, or you want to ask something else?
Yes, I can hear you. Sorry.
Okay, so moving on to question number 3, which are large-scale solar opportunities. This is unfortunately one of the things that we don't see yet. We see a lot of small size 50 megawatt, 100 megawatt kind of opportunities in the market, but unfortunately, we don't see large scale opportunities yet. However, it's just a matter of time. And I think one thing that PLN can do is do one tender with all these smaller size projects combined together. I understand land is the biggest issue, and also the transmission line might not be good enough in certain areas. But maybe the tender can be, all these small projects can be clubbed together and done as one big tender. Local content is question number 4, which I think I've covered before. Also number 5, which is the bankers and financial institutions. As I mentioned, liquidity is not a problem for renewable energy. Mr. Taniwha was right that the local banks are not yet there. The terms of loans are not competitive as compared to the global banks. And so, yeah, the local banks have to catch up, but the confidence levels are very, very high. And finally, how can the government and private sector work together? This is, I think, the most interesting question. The only way for both sectors to work together is to have a common goal. PLN wants low tariff, and this should be our goal as well. Only if our goals are aligned, we can work together. If we have lower tariffs, there will be more and more, the government will become more and more positive towards renewable energy, and we'll start seeing more and more projects in the market, which will help us in the end as well. I think Bali project last year was an excellent project, because now it showed to PLN that tariffs can be low in solar as well. I think it really opened the eyes of PLN, and I really think there's more scope for lower tariffs in the market. So once that is aligned, you will see large-scale projects, you will see a complete, even a more aggressive focus from PLN towards renewable energy. So Molly, back to you. You want me to address any questions?
Yes, there are a lot of questions in the Q&A box. And may I have your attention to the first one? So Aqua Power as an overseas solar developer, any challenges that you encountered during the early stage development? What kind of problems that keep you awake all night?
No problems. No problems keeping awake. I think, as you saw, we as a company are very bullish on Indonesia and very bullish on solar specifically. So, as I mentioned, the 3 things, that the target, the country's target of having renewable energy 23% is great, and they are pushing towards it. Their target for the tariff is a very good target, which keeps our tariff and project sustainable. So if you have good projects and you go and present to PLN, they are listening. I don't see much issues in that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and a major company that has been mentioned repeatedly in this session, which is PLN. It's sort of like the elephant in the room, pretty much monopolized the Indonesian power system.
Yes, and
yes.
Sorry, please continue. What's the question?
Yes. So, can you share your experience when doing solar projects in countries that have similar regulatory issues?
Sure. So look, it's very common in most developing world to have a single utility which is controlling the transmission, the distribution, which is your off-taker when you're signing the PPA. It's very common. PLN, yes, a lot of people maybe have issues with this structure or the workings. But frankly speaking, it also depends on us, the developers. What projects are we taking to PLN? If we are going to PLN with projects and asking for really high tariffs, of course, PLN will not be happy and will create their own view of solar technology. But as I mentioned, the Bali tender proved to PLN that if they do a tender, the tariffs can be low. And therefore, as a result, you see 7 or 8 projects already in the market in the first 4 months of 2020. So it is just a matter of, as I said, aligning our goals with PLN goals.
Yes, and again regarding the COVID-19, do you find any risky or worries within Aqua?
No, not really.
Regarding the project timeline or the auction timeline?
Yeah, I think, of course, there will be impact on the project timeline. That's the only impact. And I think that's not only for solar or Indonesia or Aqua Power. It's a global issue. And every project will face this impact. With respect to whether the demand would go away or completely or investments would go away, I really don't think so. I think Mr. Taniwha answered this question as well, that this is a temporary phenomena. The demand will come back. The oil and gas prices will come back to their normal levels. And I don't see any long-term serious threat on solar or on investments or on Indonesia.
Yes, and another very interesting question regarding the Omnibus Bill, also named the Job Creation Bill. I'm not very familiar with this bill, but maybe you can provide any comment regarding this bill.
No, sorry. Frankly, I'm also not that clear on this, so I won't be able to give any substantial comment on this.
Okay, and one last question is about the corporate PPA. I know that for Aqua Power, currently you haven't expanded into the CNI business, but would there be a future plan?
Sure. Corporate PPA, we are open to it. In Indonesia, the regulation is a bit complicated, and frankly speaking, that would require another session or another webinar to discuss. But yes, we are open to corporate PPAs and in the future.
And the bigger question would be, what are Aqua's short-term and long-term challenges for penetrating Indonesia? I think they are trying to mimic your strategy.
Short-term, yeah, it's good. I mean, I think short-term challenges, immediate term is COVID, of course, and the delays. And long-term, I would say, as the renewable energy sector would grow in Indonesia, the transmission line or the transmission system would be the biggest challenge. And I as I said before, the investment in transmission system has to be proactive to ensure that renewable energy can integrate. Other than that, as I said before, we are very optimistic about the potential here. The government is really focused and pushing. So once this COVID-19 situation clears up, I think the renewable energy tenders would be back on track.
Yes, and if there are no further questions, I think that's the end of today's content. And also we prepared some polling questions and would like to have the industry voices. Okay. So,
Okay. Thank you, Molly, and especially thank you for arranging this webinar. I know there were some technical difficulties, but I think in the end it turned out really well.
thank you so much. I really appreciate your contribution. Okay. Advertisement for our upcoming Green Energy Future Indonesia event in Jakarta, dated on September 8th. Currently, we are having the early bird promotion, saving up to $200 if you are a registrant before the 30th of April. For further questions related to the event or marketing partnership, please feel free to raise questions to Zoe and Kami. And that's the end of today's webinar. I know some of the audience are inquiring about the contact of our presenters. Their email address have already been listed in the slides, while for further contacts such as like business line or mobile number, please write me and then I will forward this message to the presenter. Thank you so much.